Hi guys, good morning and welcome back to our fourth and final video lecture for the week, Thursday, May 14th. Let's go ahead and get right on into it. So, becoming even more involved. Now that the Cold War has come to an end, the United States can focus its efforts globally in a way that it just simply couldn't before. The Soviet Union was a constant concern. Anything that the United States did, you had to take into account what the reaction from the Soviet Union would be. Well, now that the Soviet Union has collapsed, the United States is going to become more involved than ever before. Okay, so as the Cold War drew to a close, the United States organized several military actions against foreign dictators. Previously, fear of inciting a superpower conflict or losing an anti-communist ally might have inhibited such action. But now, with the Cold War over, those ideas are a thing of the past, just like the Soviet Union. Okay, next slide. Noriega is ousted in Panama. The first of these U.S. military interventions occurred in Panama, where General Manuel Noriega had ruled since 1983. Although Noriega was a ruthless dictator, he had close ties to the United States and had supported the Reagan administration by aiding the Contras in Nicaragua. U.S. relations with Noriega soured under Reagan's successor, George H.W. Bush, in 1988. Before Bush took office, the United States indicted indicted Noriega on drug trafficking charges. The following year, Panamanians protested Noriega when he voided national elections. Bush would subsequently withdraw U.S. support from Noriega in order to emphasize Noriega's violations of both human rights and democratic rule. So Noriega convicted. Bush eventually decided to intervene, sending an invasion force of more than 20,000 U.S. troops to Panama on December 20th, 1989. 2 weeks later, the U.S. troops captured Noriega and transported him to Miami. A few years after Noriega's capture, in 1992, a U.S. federal court convicted Noriega of drug trafficking and sentenced him to prison. But that wasn't the only dictator that we were after in the 1990s. I think the next one, most of you guys will know who this is. Saddam Hussein in Iraq. This isn't going to be the last time we talk about Saddam Hussein. We're going to talk about him again next week. After Panama, Bush faced a crisis in the Middle East, where Iraq invaded Kuwait, its much smaller southern neighbor, in August of 1990. Now, the Iraqi dictator Saddam Hussein coveted Kuwait's reserve of oil and justified his invasion by claiming that Kuwait was rightfully part of Iraq. Shortly after Iraq's invasion, Saddam announced plans to annex Kuwait, meaning make it part of Iraq officially. The world answers the call. President Bush condemned the invasion, calling for an international coalition to force Saddam out of Kuwait. 34 countries, including most of the Arab nations, joined the UN-sponsored coalition. The Soviet Union agreed to collaborate with the coalition despite the country's previously friendly relations with Iraq. That is a ringing endorsement of the Soviet Union's effort to work with the United States. So, defending Kuwait. The coalition initially sent a force of nearly 700,000 troops to Saudi Arabia's border with Kuwait, which included more than 400,000 U.S. soldiers. The United Nations also imposed economic sanctions on Iraq, hoping to peacefully force Saddam's withdrawal. Saddam would refuse to withdraw, so on January 12th, Congress approved the use of all necessary means to free Kuwait from Iraqi occupation. Next and last slide for the day. Today was a quick lesson. A quick outcome. 4 days later, the Persian Gulf War began. The first phase of the war consisted of 6 weeks of airstrikes against Iraq before the ground war commenced on February 24th. Now, the conflicts we've talked about this year have been long-lasting, be it the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, World War I, World War II, Vietnam. This conflict only lasted for 4 days. The actual land portion of this conflict was only 4 days. So beginning on February 24th, and then on February 28th, Iraq would agree to a ceasefire. Now, although the coalition chose not to oust Saddam Hussein from power, the Persian Gulf War was a success for the United States and its allies. They had demonstrated that international cooperation could be marshaled against a common enemy for the purpose of countering aggression. All right, so that brings us to an end of our video lectures for the week. Next week, we are going to talk about President Clinton, President Bush, President Obama, and finish up with President Donald Trump. All right, I hope you guys are well. As always, have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you next week. Bye.